Great.
Hello, everyone. This is Carol Dimitrov, and we are with Ronald Tiggle today for our OPA member presentation. And Ronald is going to be talking about calculating secondary, tertiary, and solar arc directions. And these directions are three of the most important predictive techniques astrologers use. Yet few astrologers know how to calculate secondary progressions correctly. Since solar arc directions are derived from the secondary progressed sun, these are also an error. Edward Johndro identified this error 90 years ago, yet more recent textbooks on astrology are still teaching the traditional, standard, incorrect method for computing secondary progressions and solar arc directions. So during this presentation, Ronald will show you how to calculate secondary and tertiary progressions and solar arc directions correctly and point out why the traditional method is incorrect and describe the magnitude of the error. The correct calculation options will be identified in popular astrological software such as Sirius, Solar Fire, and Kepler 7 and 8. A method will also be given to correct the error when your software only uses the traditional method. And just a little bit about Ronald. Let's see, my screen went blank. Ronald is a psychologist. Let me just get that back up again here. A little bit about Ronald. He is a PhD in social psychology from UCLA. He has an MA in psychology from CSULB and a BS in chemistry from Howard University. He's worked as a research psychologist for several federal agencies conducting social science research in organizational and health psychology, and is a former research director for the International Society for Astrological Research. And that was during the late 70s through 1984. He's a contributing author to Astrological Research Methods, Volume 1, and he's published research in a traditional psychology journal providing validating evidence for astrology. He's certified as a professional astrologer by Professional Astrologers, Inc. in 1974, and he's also a member of OPA, a lifetime member of ESAR and the AFA. Ronald has taught introductory and intermediate classes on astrology and is a presenter at both astrological and psychological conferences. And then to reach out to Ronald and to also see his website, it's soul1.org, and that information will also be in your mailing. And with that, Ronald, it is all yours.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you are. According to Edward Johndro and Cyril Fagan, astrologers have been calculating secondary progress chart and solar arcs incorrectly. The error, though small, accumulates at the rate of 1 day per year of life. Progress aspects can be off by 60 days for someone 60 years old when the standard method is used. I wonder if I can get rid of this. Let me see here.
Can I help you with something, Ronald?
Yeah, was it the screen picture of me is blocked? Maybe I can get rid of this picture.
Do you want me to turn that off for you?
No, I can hide it. There we go.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
It was in my way here. I couldn't really see my slide as well. Let me see if I can move this out. Yeah, there we go. I just moved it.
I just got a message from Maureen. Maureen, I'm going to go ahead and send you. Is everyone else hearing Ronald correctly? Maureen, I think that might be on your particular computer. Everybody else is hearing him fine. Okay, great. Great. So Maureen, just go ahead and maybe check your volume. Thank you.
Oops. Let me just move this up a little bit. All right. And let's see, where are we here? Did I lose my slide? Okay, are we ready to go back again? As
Yes.
I mentioned before, the error accumulates at the rate of 1 day per year of life. And so by the time a person is 60 years old, their calculations will be off by 60 days. And by that, I mean that the progress aspects will will become due 60 days too early for both secondary and tertiary progressions and solar arc directions. And the progress moon can be off by as much as 3 months in natal charts. And in mundane charts of countries several hundred years old, they can be off by 7 or more degrees. For example, if you were to do secondary progressions and solar arcs for the USA chart, of course, US being born in 1776, the, the calculations for 2020 would be off by 244 days. That's about 8 months. Many years ago, the Church of Light did extensive research on secondary progressions, and they found that the secondary progress moon was not a reliable timer of events when the standard method was used. The standard method being a solar day is equal to 1 year. Now, the reason why the standard method of equating a solar day equal a year is incorrect is that it violates the proportionate relationship that exists between sidereal time of a solar day and the sidereal time of a sidereal day and the diurnal rotation of each type of day. And we'll have much more on this later to make it clear to you. Now, when Johndro's method, a sidereal day is equal to a year, is used, the progress moon becomes a reliable timer of events. And I have an example of this in charts. When we get to the next session where we actually look at charts, I'll show you a case where the progress moon was exact to the day of an event. Cyril Fagan also noted that a sidereal day is that the sidereal day equal a year should be used independent of which zodiac you prefer. And it was Cyril Fagan who gave this type of progression the name Bezier-corrected progressions. Unfortunately, the name he gave it is not really descriptive of what it actually is. So a lot of people won't really recognize that unless they know that a sidereal day is equal to a year, and that's what he means by Bezier-corrected progression. By the way, for those of you who use Van Dam primaries, this error also applies to timing for Van Dam primaries. And the reason this is the case is because the Van Dam primaries derive their timing from the secondary progress chart. Minor progressions, which is a lunar month is equal to 1 year, are not affected by this problem since they're not based on days and should be calculated by the method recommended by C.C. Zane and the Church of Light. Sadly, even though this error was identified 91 years ago by Johndro, most astrologers and astrology textbooks are still teaching the incorrect standard method of a solar day is equal to a year. Some astrologers had been aware that the standard method of calculating secondary progressions and solar arcs become less accurate with age, but did not know why. For example, Robert Glasscock had mentioned it in some of his classes and others, but they didn't know what the magnitude of the error was or how to correct it. And that's what we'll learn about this afternoon.
Excuse me, Ronald.
Yes.
Do you mind bringing your chair in just a little bit closer? And then also, I think your chair is making some noise.
Oh, okay.
It might be. I'm trying to figure out where that background noise is, and I think it's just your chair. So.
Okay. Let me see if I can stop rocking. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Maybe I can change chairs. Well, we'll see.
I think it'll be fine as long as you're not rocking. If you're rocking on it, I think it makes a sound.
You're right, it does.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Well, that's okay. So as I mentioned, sadly, even though this error was identified by Johndro 91 years ago, most in the book, The Earth and the Heavens, most astrologers and astrology textbooks are still teaching the incorrect standard method for computing secondaries and solar arcs. And currently, some astrology programs, though, do provide an option for Bezier-corrected progressions or an option to add your own progression. And the list of them are shown below. Horoscope. I'm not going to go through all of those. Some of these programs are listed, such as Kepler 8, Nova Charts, and Sirius and Solar Fire and Windstar actually have an option for Bezier corrected progressions built in, as does the Churchill Light system. And unfortunately, there are a few programs that are missing this option. So if you're using Astro Gold or Time Passages and you'd like to have the Bezier corrected option built in, you might want to write them and ask them to add it to your program. And unfortunately, it will take many decades to update astrology books and to change curriculum in astrological schools. However, astrological software manufacturers can greatly accelerate this process by making the correct procedure the default. As you know, a lot of new astrology students get their astrology programs, and because they don't know that much about astrology or astronomy, they tend to use the default calculations. So that will greatly help, I think. I became aware of this problem in 2010 when I happened to pass my bookcase and was drawn to a book by Cyril Fagan on sidereal astrology. Now, I'm a tropical astrologer, but I'm curious about what others are doing. So I started thumbing through that book, and I noticed a chapter where he said that most astrologers do not know how to calculate secondary progressions correctly. And that certainly piqued my interest. Then I remember reading in Charles Jane's pamphlet on secondary progressions, where he had mentioned that Johndro and Cyril Fagan insisted that secondary progressions be calculated using a sidereal day equal to 1 year. And so that made me want to take a look at Johndro's book again. I was originally introduced to Johndro in 1973 when I was studying astrology with Barbara Waters, and she was a big Johndro fan. So I bought his book, but in 73, we had no astrological software, and it wasn't easy to test some of the recommendations that Johndro made. In addition, his book is very technical to read. But in 2010, when I finally got around to looking at this again, we had lots of software, so I immediately sat down to test Johndro's idea of calculating secondary progressions of solar arcs with a sidereal day. And so I tested it on the year when my progress midheaven conjuncted my natal sun. I received a promotion at that time, and using the standard method, the promotion came due 43 days too early. And I remember when that happened, I was pondering why that was the case. But when I used Johndro's method, a sidereal day is equal to a year, the progression was exact on the day my promotion became effective. And that got my attention big time. And so I then proceeded to explore this method even more and to find out why that was the case. So who was Edward Johndro? He was one of the most brilliant astrologers of the 20th century. Johndro was a mathematician, a physicist, and a radio engineer, and he taught the first two subjects professionally. He developed a successful system for forecasting commodities based upon eclipses while working for W.D. Gann. W.D. Gann was a famous stock market investor in the 1920s and 30s. Johndro also invented an electrical descendant, which we call today the vertex. The vertex is the intersection of the prime vertical with the ecliptic in the west, and is associated with fated encounters or encounters where you have less free will. And we can think of the vertex as a secondary descendant. Johndro was an empirical astrologer who verified all the techniques that he proposed. And knowing this, I think that people should give his ideas very serious consideration. Oops. So in this chart, we work with primarily two circles here. The ecliptic, shown in this diagram, and the equator. Progressions and directions are based on the two natural classes, those based on the actual motion of the planets and those based on the diurnal rotation of the Earth. And the ecliptic is the plane of the apparent path of the sun through the zodiac from a geocentric perspective. And secondary progressions are calculated using the actual motion of the planets along the ecliptic, but they can also be done in right ascension along the equator. And the right ascension so those are the two primary circles that astrologers use. In some cases, the prime vertical is used. Apparently, Johndro used the prime vertical when he invented the vertex. And the prime vertical would be this vertical circle here. Johndro criticized some of the faulty methods and of directions and progressions that some astrologers use that were not based on sound astronomical principles, such as directing angles by the Ptolemaic arc, the 1-degree method, and the solar day equal a year. Now, of course, the 1-degree method is a very good technique when you're sitting with the client and you're eyeballing when you're checking their birth time. But for precise calculations, the true solar arc should be used. Johndro, of course, recommended that instead of using a solar day equal a year, that we should use a sidereal day for progressions in solar arcs. He maintained that solar arcs should be calculated in both right ascension and ecliptic longitude, and that one does not supplant the other. He maintained that there was a qualitative difference between the two arcs. Solar arcs in right ascension time events, while ecliptic arcs show the reaction to events. For example, one event could precede the other, or they could occur together. For example, the solar arc generated by right ascension could represent a fire in a theater. The solar arc generated by the ecliptic produced the public reactions to the fire and a demand for greater safety. If the ecliptic arc occurred first, there would be a public demand for greater safety in theaters followed by a fire, or the two could become exact at the same time, leading to the fire and the public reaction being simultaneous. Johndro also recommended that both direct and converse solar arcs should be used. He stated that our concept of time is basically stated that at the speed of light, time does not exist. He saw that due to the now he used traditionally, astrologers, when we're looking at the orbs to use for solar arcs and progress charts, we use a 1 degree applying, 1 degree separating. But Johndro used much tighter orbs. He saw that due to the planetary latitude and inclination of planetary orbits to the ecliptic, aspects to the same system of directing could repeat many times. So the effect of an aspect by direction could be spread out over a period of time. Therefore, he left a time orb. He allowed a time orb of 6 days for interplanetary aspects. And because the symbol diameter of the sun was 16 minutes and the moon was 15 minutes, the time orb for directions involving the lights was 3 months. And solar arcs became the prime tool for rectification, especially for directing Uranus to the angles. So as you can see, with Johndro's thinking, he was very technically inclined, and his book is fairly difficult reading. By the way, Johndro always worked with rectified charts, and therefore he could use these much tighter orbs fairly reliably. And if you'd like to know more about Johndro, there's a link that I recommend that you check out below. So what are solar arc directions and secondary progressions? A whole talk could be given just on this one topic, but I'm going to just give it one slide in this particular case. They are symbolic directions based on astronomical phenomena. Progressions are like slow transits. Solar arcs move at the rate of the progress sun, and you calculate them by taking the difference between the natal chart, the natal sun, and the progress sun for the particular year of interest, and you add that arc to all of the natal planets. Secondary progressions were mentioned by Kepler and popularized by Placidus in the 17th century and Galileo in the 20th century. Placidus used secondaries as an auxiliary to primaries, and therefore he called secondary progressions secondaries. Now, one of the fundamental guiding principles to astrology is the Hermetic principle. As above, so below, that man is a microcosm of the macrocosm, and that the whole is reflected in its parts. And from this, we derive many of the concepts of astrology, such as the Dwadasamsas and the decadence and harmonic astrology. And also the idea of a moment in time can equal a lifetime in terms of a natal chart or an event chart or a horary chart. Well, a moment in time can equal a year, the progress chart, or solar return, or lunar month, tertiary progressions, or a day, transits. In the 1980s, a mathematical theory called fractals began to become better known. And fractals, from my perspective, is really a mathematical presentation of the Hermetic principle. Fractals are infinitely complex patterns that are self-similar across different scales. This means that the whole pattern is contained in every part. They are created through a simple mathematical formula that is recursive on different scales, and they appear everywhere in nature. An example of a fractal nature is the fern leaf. When we look at the fern leaf, we see that the whole is also reflected in each part. So we see that the stems of the fern leaf are really a reflection of the overall shape of the fern leaf. The same concept applies in astrology when we look at solar arcs and secondary regressions, etc. This other triangle, when I first saw this graphic, I didn't realize that it would be moving. But you can think of the large triangle as the natal chart and the smaller triangle as a secondary regression. And then we can think of the smaller triangles as tertiary regression, etc. And the minors as an even smaller triangle. So the concept of the whole being reflected in its parts on different scales applies to the various techniques that we use in astrology for predicting future trends in terms of secondaries and solar arcs and tertiaries and minor progressions. So the Hermetic principle tells us that a day can be equated to a year, but fractal theory enables us to determine whether a sidereal day or a solar day can be mathematically equated to a year because by its definition, a fractal is a precise mathematical function that maintains its proportionality when calculated on different scales. An example of an astrological fractal is 1 day is equal to 1 year of 365 and a quarter days. In astrology, we have two types of days, a sidereal day and the slightly longer solar day. Johndro recommended that astrologers equate a sidereal day equal to 1 year rather than the standard method of equating a solar day equal to 1 year. Unfortunately, in his book, he didn't explain why. He just said it was beyond the scope of the book at the time. And so I had to figure out why he recommended that and why that was better, which I will show you during this presentation. So what are solar arc directions? We'll continue with this. An example of a sidereal day is a fractal, is the equating of the 360-degree diurnal rotation of a sidereal day with the 360-degree revolution of the sun's apparent motion through the tropical zodiac, 365 and a quarter days. In this system of progressions, the transiting sun returns to its natal place on the exact day when the sidereal progress midheaven returns to its natal place in 365 and a quarter days. In astrology, we know that when the sun returns to its natal place, it's also known as the solar return. So things with this particular process of using a sidereal day equal to a year seem to synchronize very well. In contrast, the standard method is equating the 361-degree diurnal rotation of a solar day with the 360-degree revolution of the sun's apparent motion through the tropical zodiac, 365 and a quarter days. The above statement is suspect because astrologers know that from one solar day to the next, the MC at noon will move at the rate of the transiting sun. And this will become clarified as we look deeper into this problem. But before we do that, I want to define what do progressions and solar arcs represent. They represent really the possibilities of individual growth within the limits of the potential mapped by the natal chart during a specific time frame. The Tibetan master in his book on esoteric astrology maintains that the secondary progress chart is a very important chart and it represents the unfolding consciousness, or the life of the soul and its inflow through personality, according to Alan Leo. We can think of the chart, the secondary progress chart, as representing right karma, or the effects of past actions, thoughts, and feelings, both positive and negative, that attract events and situations to build character and expand our consciousness. The progress chart and solar arcs show opportunities for growth as a function of your consciousness, choices, and discernment in service of what I call the prime directive, which is the perfection of the divine archetype within. So let's look into greater detail into the calculations of progressions, directions, and the definition of a solar day. A solar day is the time taken for the Earth to rotate about its axis so that the sun appears in the same position in the sky. For example, the time taken for the sun to move from the midheaven on one day to the midheaven on the next day is equal to a solar day and 24 hours of clock time. A solar day is longer than a sidereal time because it includes the additional distance the Earth has moved around the sun during a 24-hour period. It is in excess of one complete 360-degree diurnal revolution by approximately 1 degree, or on average 59 minutes 8 seconds per day, or 3 minutes and 56.7 seconds of sidereal time. This is the standard rate, known as Q2 in astrological computer software. A sidereal day is the time it takes the Earth to rotate about its axis so that distant stars appear in the same position in the sky. In terms of the tropical zodiac, a sidereal day can be defined as the interval between two successive transits of the first point of Aries over the upper meridian or midheaven of any of any place, and it's known as Q1 in astrological software. So a sidereal day consists of one complete 360-degree diurnal rotation. A sidereal day of 24 hours of sidereal time lasts 23 hours and 56 minutes and 4.09 seconds of solar time. So the bottom line is that a sidereal day equals 360 degrees, and a solar day has a diurnal rotation of 361 degrees, and that a sidereal day is a slightly shorter than a solar day. And these become very important factors when we look at the difference between using a sidereal day and a solar day to calculate secondary progressions. Now, an ephemeris is calculated from one solar day to the next solar day, but all calculations are done in sidereal time. So here we see our sidereal time here. But we can adjust the number of days a solar day equals to make it proportionate to a sidereal day, using the concepts of fractals and also the principle of, and also the Hermetic principle. Johndro recommends that a sidereal day equal 365.25 days rather than a solar day. He equates the 360-degree diurnal rotation of a sidereal day to the annual 360-degree revolution of the Earth around the Sun and 365.25 days. Traditionally, a solar day, which has a diurnal rotation of 361 degrees, has been equated to the annual 360-degree revolution of the Earth around the Sun in 365.25 days. Both cannot be correct. We can use the principle of fractals to scale a solar day in proportion to a sidereal day. This rescaling enables us to use a regular ephemeris, which is calculated in solar days. So we know that a sidereal day is slightly less than a solar day, 23 hours, 56 minutes of solar time, in fact. And a solar day is slightly longer than a sidereal day by 24 hours, 3 minutes, and 56 seconds. So we're going to make to solve for how many days a solar day should be equal to, we're going to form a proportion. And in this proportion, we have the diurnal rotation of a sidereal day divided by the diurnal rotation of a solar day. And we know that a sidereal day is equal to a year. So we want to know how many days a solar day will be equal to. And then we solve that and we come to the conclusion that that really a solar day is not equal to 365.25 days, but really 366.25 days. Thus, when a person is 1 year old, the current calendar day for the progress date will be 1 day past the birthday. And when they are 2 years old, the current calendar date for the progress birth date will be 2 days past the birth date. At 50 years old, the current calendar date for the progress birth date will be 50 days past the birth date. So the ratio of a sidereal day to a solar day used in astrological software is very close to the one calculated above. I got it within 5 decimal places. SolarFire uses, they add an additional 566 to the end of what I arrived at here. So I was close, within 5 decimal places, and so those calculations are very close to what's actually used in SolarFire and other software, and also in Sirius and Kepler 8. Now this table really identifies the problem very clearly. So let's look at Table 1. Table 1 shows why secondary and tertiary progressions in solar arc directions become due 1 day earlier than they should with each passing year. So by the time you're 60 years old, your progressions and directions are 60 days off. They're coming due 60 days too early. So let's take a look at this table. Here we have table 1. This is the standard method. A solar day is equal to a year. This is known as Q2 in astrological software. So a solar day is assumed to be equal to 365 and a quarter days, but is really equal to 366 and a quarter days. And so we have a setup where we have the progress days equal to 366 and a quarter days, but the calendar day here is equal to 365 and a quarter days. So here at table 1, we want to, when we're calculating the progress date for, say, the person's age 1, we have the progress date here, and then, but we assume that the calendar date for that progress date will be the birth date 1 year later. So March 21st, he's born on March 21st, 2001. And so it's assumed that the progress date will be on March 21st, 2002 on the person's birthday. But that's not really correct, because here we're forcing the progress date, which really requires 366 and a quarter days to complete its rotation, to complete it in 365 and a quarter days. So we knocked off 1 day here. So we're causing it to become due 1 day too soon. Now, in the Bayesian method, we have a progress days equal to 366 and a quarter days, and the calendar days equal to 366 and a quarter days. And now when we advance the progress date, we see that the person is born on March 21st, 2001, but when we calculate his progressions at age 1, instead of being March 21st, 2002, it's March 22nd, 2002. They count for that extra day. And if you were doing progressions of the solar arcs of the US chart, they'd actually be off by 244 days in 2020, because the US is 244 years old in 2020. So let's look at a progress chart for a person who's born, who is 1 day old. So here we see, looking at the standard solar arc progressions in longitude, the calendar date for a person 1 year old is March 21st, and sure enough, when the Bayesian correction is used, it's March 22nd, 1 day later. So right from the start, right from the first year of age, the progressions are already 1 day off, and they become less accurate as time goes on. So here we see the ephemeris, and we notice that dates in the ephemeris below are the same as the dates in table 2. But for the current calendar of the birth date year, this reflects the diurnal rotation of 361 degrees, which equates to 366 and a quarter days. Notice that the sidereal time exceeds 24 hours from 1 day to the next. Now, the ephemeris doesn't really list the 24 hours, but they just list the amount of time that it exceeds it, which is on average 3 minutes and 56 seconds per day. In addition, if a solar day were really equal to 365 and a quarter days, its diurnal motion would have to equal 360 degrees. However, astronomy demonstrates that this is not the case. The diurnal motion for a solar day, by definition, is equal to 361 degrees, which equates to 366 and a quarter days, for 1 solar day equal a year. Experience demonstrates that astrologers have greater accuracy when they use symbolic progressions and directions that have an accurate astronomical basis. As above, so below suggests that we use the actual data provided by astronomy for determining solar arc. For example, true solar arc versus the mean solar arc. Now, when Neibold introduced the mean solar arc, that was certainly an improvement over the 1 degree method. But the mean solar arc, which is 59 minutes 8, which says that which calculates the average motion of the sun, daily motion of the sun is 59 minutes 8 seconds, really would imply that the Earth has a spherical orbit. But in reality, we know that the Earth's orbit is elliptical. And as a result of that, the Earth sometimes moves faster or slower. It moves slower during the summer. Uh, so for that reason, you want to use the true solar arc. When you use the mean, whether you use it in the right ascension or ecliptic arc, sometimes it's going to be correct and sometimes it will be a little off because it's not following the true orbit of the sun. The tertiary progressions also need to be adjusted. So the Bija correction has to be applied to a day is equal to a lunar month using the same formula that we found earlier. So it makes it it results in a slightly longer progress day. Instead of being 27.321, it's 27.3.396. And later on, we'll see that although that seems like a small amount, it adds up as the years roll on. However, in the case of minor progressions, they don't need to have this correction applied. The minor progressions are part of the Church of Light system, and it's taught by C.C. Zane and Dorsey Stone. So how will the Bija corrected progressions and solar arcs work in practice? So let's look at some charts. Okay, so so the difference in the standard and the Bija corrected secondary progressions at age 30 years old, we notice that the progress moon is off by 1 degree. Let me just blow this up a little bit. And let me bring this a little closer. So the progress moon is off by 1 degree. Here in the standard method, it is 26 degrees Pisces 38 minutes. And then in the Bija corrected method, it's 25 Pisces 37 minutes. So it's about 1 degree. And in the case of the progress midheaven and progress sun, it's off by about 4 minutes. And okay. Now at age 60, the standard and the Bija corrected tertiary progressions have an even larger error. Notice that the distance between the sun is 2 degrees, and the distance between the tertiary progress moon and the Bija, the standard method versus the Bija corrected method is actually 27 degrees off. So let's enlarge this a little bit and get a better look at that. Let's see here. So we see that in the tertiary progress solar arc longitude, the tertiary progress sun is 10 degrees 56 minutes, and over here it's 8 degrees 48 minutes in the Bija corrected tertiary. That's about 2 degrees, and then the progress moon And the standard progression is 29 degrees Gemini, 29 minutes, and the progress moon over here in the Bija corrected is 2 degrees Gemini in 47 minutes. And that's a huge difference, 27 degrees. So we know that the tertiary progress moon has a very large error for someone who's 60 years old. This is an interesting chart, and it shows the value of using the Bija corrected progressions, because here it shows how the secondary progress moon can be used as to time important events. I shared this technique several years ago with another astrologer, and he used it to examine the breakup in his relationship with his girlfriend. So she announced that she was moving out on the day that her progress moon rather, in her 5th house was exactly square her progress Uranus, and also triggered the natal Sun square Uranus aspect and the progress Venus opposed Uranus aspect on May 17th. Now, the standard method was exact 53 days earlier. In that case, the progress moon was in 11 Gemini, 28 degrees on May 17th. So here we can see the progress moon, 9 Gemini. Make it a little bigger here. Let's see if we can make it a little larger. 9 Gemini, 22 degrees, and it's exactly square the progress Uranus, which is also 9 Gemini, 22. So it's square to the minute, and really sets up a T-square here between the progress Venus, which is the progress Venus is also at 9 degrees 30 minutes. So it really kicks off a T-square here. Whereas if we use the standard method, it would have been 2 degrees off in 53 days. Since she was 53 years old, it would have been 53 days off. Now, this is an example of using the US chart. I chose the Sibley chart. There are 2 popular charts, the 7-degree Gemini rising and the Sibley chart. I just picked the Sibley chart. I don't really have a favorite. And in this particular chart, we notice that the progress sun is off 40 minutes and the progress moon is off 9 degrees. So let's see if we can make this a little larger here. Let's blow this up a little bit. So here we see look at the progress moon is so here we have the progress moon is 24 degrees Capricorn in the standard solar method. And in the Bija corrected system, the progress moon is 15 Capricorn. 02, so 9 degrees, very large, and 244 days off. And the progress sun is 14 Pisces 56 versus 15 Pisces 36. And in this particular chart, the progress midheaven conjuncts my natal sun in the Bija corrected progression on the day that my promotion was effective, whereas the standard method came due 43 days earlier. Let's blow this up a little bit. Having some difficulty doing that. Let me see me go back here. This outer ring is the Bija corrected progression. The inner ring is the standard solar arc, a standard secondary progression. And the natal, of course, is my natal sun. So here we see that To the minute, the progress midheaven was conjunct my natal sun on July 31st, 1988, which was the effective day of my promotion. And using the standard method, it was exact on June the 18th, 43 days earlier. In this chart, this is a chart for when let me blow this up a little bit. This is a chart for when I had went out on a date with a friend who we went out as friends, and later I ended up marrying this person. And by the way, I did not know about these techniques in 2002. And so it's very interesting how things worked out in terms of the timing. Let me just blow this up for a minute. On September 21st, the solar arc Venus was sextile my natal ascendant. So here we see the solar arc Venus, 20 minutes Aries, and exactly sextile my natal sun in the same degree. And then 2 weeks later, when the solar arc Venus conjuncted my ascendant, the relationship shifted from friends to a romance around the middle of October. And at that time, my solar arc Venus was conjunct my natal ascendant exactly. And this is interesting because the seventh house is also Venus is also the ruler of my seventh house of marriage and partnerships. On my wedding day, the progress Venus, using the Bija corrected method, was trine my midheaven within 1 minute of orb. Using the standard method, the progress Venus was off by 59 days. Also, the progress moon was sextile my natal moon by 1 minute using the, let me blow this chart up a little bit. So we see that the Bija corrected progress Venus is within 1 minute of trine the natal midheaven. Whereas the standard method, the progress Venus is off by 11 degrees or 59 days. In the case of the progress moon, which was sextile my natal moon within 10 minutes of orb, it was off by a couple of degrees using the standard secondary progress method. In December 2018, I noticed that my progress Venus was going to square my natal Venus on December 28th, and during the Christmas holidays. So every year, I often go to Washington D.C. to visit friends and relatives, and so I anticipated that I'd have a very much more socially active time during that particular trip. And indeed, that actually happened. Let me blow this up a little bit. My wife unfortunately passed in 2014, so I was open to meeting new people. So I happened to have, I happened to be having lunch with a friend on December 29th, and he decided that he would like me to meet another friend of his, a lady friend. And so he set up a meeting on for me to meet her on December 30th. And that progress Venus square Venus aspect was exact on December 28th. So to show you that you can use these for fairly precise timing. And we're still friends, by the way. Now, I want to also examine the relationship between natal diurnal midheaven and the Bija-corrected progress diurnal chart. Just as a diurnal chart can be calculated for each day after birth from the natal chart, a progress diurnal chart, also known as a quotidian, can be calculated for each day during the year for the progress chart. In the case of the Bija-corrected chart, one sidereal equal year, the diurnal ascendant and the midheaven will always be nearly identical within a degree to the natal diurnal chart on the same day. The difference is due to the true solar arc versus using the mean formula for the progress quotidian. In contrast, the progress diurnal chart using the standard calculation technique, one solar day equal year, will be off by as many days as a person's age in years. So let's look at this example. We have the natal diurnal and the Bija progress quotidian for when I was age 20. So here we see the diurnal progress MC at 24 Cancer 53 minutes and the Bija progress diurnal at 24 Cancer 37 minutes. So they're within a degree, very close. And the difference between the two is the fact that one is using a mean algorithm versus the true solar arc. Whenever you have to choose between the two, always use the true solar arc. Now, looking at the natal diurnal versus the standard progress quotidian using the standard method, we'll notice that at age 20, we have 24 Cancer 53 for the natal diurnal and 14 Leo 35. So it's off by about 20 degrees for someone who's 20 years old. Now, we found out earlier that we have to make an adjustment for the tertiary progress chart as well as the secondaries. And this is just sort of repeating that. Some astrology programs have two options for calculating the progress chart: the standard method, which is commonly referred to as Q2, and the Bija correction method, which is referred to as Q1 in solar fire. So how to set the Bija corrected solar arcs correction in solar fire? So we click on the preferences menu, then we go to edit, and then progress diurnals, and that will bring up this submenu. And then we will select solar arcs in longitude, then we click on Bija corrected, and then we click OK. And once the adjustment is made, secondary and tertiary and solar arcs are calculated using the Bija option. To correct for the Bija, to select the Bija option in Sirius and Kepler 8, starting with Sirius 1.2, by the way, you would click on the progress chart, and select progress chart desired and the number of days in the year menu. And that menu would bring up this dialog box. And when you click the Bija correction dialog box, the field will automatically populate with this value as shown here. And so if you're going to, and in Sirius, you have to select each one. You have to select the one for secondaries and also the one for tertiaries if you're going to use tertiaries, and then click OK. And Kepler 7, there's a file called progval.dat, which you'd have to edit using Notepad and change the values. Now, if you're still using Kepler 7, you might want to upgrade. It'll be a lot easier. Now, if your program lacks a Bija progression or custom progression option, then you can use Google Assistant to calculate corrections. For example, if you were 60 years old and the standard method of progressing stated that an aspect was exact on June 21st, 2019, the corrected date would be 60 days later. So you can ask Google Assistant 60 days from June 21st, 2019, and Google will respond with Tuesday, August 20th, 2019. Google Assistant is available for both Android and Apple iPhones and tablets. Currently, no astrological program automatically adjusts Van primaries when the Bija option is selected for progressions. So you may have to use Google Assistant to adjust those dates. Some final thoughts. So unfortunately, it will take many decades to update astrological books. However, astrological schools like Kepler College can update their curriculum to reflect the Bija-corrected calculations of secondary and tertiary progressions of solar arcs. And astrological software manufacturers can greatly accelerate this process by making the correct procedure the default. Where possible, I would suggest that we substitute hermetic calculations for progressions rather than mean calculations. An example of a hermetic tertiary progression would be the tertiary progress sun at the rate of the secondary progress moon. When the secondary progress moon returns to its natal place, the tertiary progress sun will return to its natal place. A similar technique is used with the hermetic minor progressions, where the minor progress moon is progress at the rate of the transiting natal sun. At the present, that algorithm for calculating tertiaries is not available in any astrological program. And there's some references I recommend. There's, I would say that you might want to take a look at these here on fractals, some interesting information contained in these. I think there's one or two from David Cochran. And I just wanted to point out this little comment that Johndro made. Johndro comments that when his techniques are used, orbs of influence are probably never necessary if we take the trouble to refer every direction to the plane consistent with the nature of the event. And by plane, I think he's referring to either in the ecliptic or right ascension. And if you're interested in contacting me for further information or for astrological consultations, you can reach me at my email. I was supposed to get my website, my astrological website up, but I couldn't get my act together to do that one. Now, if we have time, I can actually bring up the software and actually make those changes. What do you think, Carol? Should I do that?
You could, yes, you could. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, I can ask you a question, perhaps.
Sure.
While we're thinking about this. Marlene is asking that you had mentioned Robert Glasscock and had noticed the increasing errors and progressions in solar arcs. And she's asking, has Ron told, have you told Glasscock about using the Bijou
I,
corrections
I
since he's
actually,
teaching classes?
I actually sent him an email some time ago, but I haven't heard from him yet. But I guess I sent him an email maybe a month ago. So maybe, yeah, so I have attempted to reach out to him. I have reached out to him, yes.
Great, great. And we're getting people coming in saying thank you very much. It was a really interesting presentation, and they are looking forward to the recording. And we do have a website listed also for you as soul1.org.
Yeah, yes,
And
and that's
mhm,
my website on the meditation technique that I teach.
great. And do you want to talk a little bit about that too? Because I know a lot of people here are interested in meditation.
I'd be happy to do that. So right now I have Solar Fire up, and so you can change it by, I just clicked on, let me get rid of that. I
Okay,
just clicked,
great.
I just clicked on angle of progressions, and I just clicked right here on that. It's a quick way to get to it. And it brings up this menu box, and you just go down here, because I've already selected solar arc and longitude, but you can also do it in right ascension, since Johndro suggests that you should do it both in right ascension and longitude. It says one does not supplant the other. This is an easy way to do it. And here, in terms of progress day type, we have the Bija correction, the Bija option right here already selected. And then you just click OK, and you're good to go.
Excellent. So
And
everybody, I think, sees that on there. If they have solar fire, they would be able to navigate that fairly easy with that demonstration.
screen sharing has stopped. I didn't want to do that. So what did I just do here?
Let's see, I may have to, you
Oh, here,
disabled,
no, I got it right
you
here.
got it? Okay.
Here we go. And let's go back. So now I want to bring up Solar Fire. Let's see if I'm not Solar Fire.
No.
Kepler. Uh, so
Oh,
here
there
we
you
are,
go. Okay, great.
Sirius. So in Sirius, and also it would be the same in Kepler 8, you would go to progression. So we would calculate the progress chart. And then you would select number. Well, I already have it set up for solar arc in the solar arc, the progress solar arc by the midheaven by solar arc. And so next you would select number of days in a year. You click on that box, and then you would click this box here, which I've already clicked, and then you say OK. Then actually it actually calculates a chart for you. So that's how you do it in Kepler 8 and Sirius.
Fantastic. Thank you. And does anyone else have any last minute questions before we end for today? We're just getting a lot of thank yous, and this is fascinating.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So everyone is just really pleased and thankful that you were able to share your knowledge and research and information with us. We thank you for doing this OPA presentation for us, Ronald. And for everyone that's listening, they're asking too, do you teach classes in this?
You know, I used to teach classes, and I may start doing them again. Um, right now, I'm not teaching classes. I'm just getting geared up to kind of get out there a little more than I have been in the past. Uh, and so that may happen. But one thing I do want to say is that that using the Bija corrected progression will enable you to time things so much more precisely. And it's very useful for electional astrology because you can time things to the day
Yes, I could
with
see that.
secondary regressions and solar directions, which and one of the reasons why Johndro was known as a precision astrologer as also was Arlene Kramer. I had a session with Arlene Kramer a number of years ago, and I was telling her about this technique, and she was telling me that she always did it this way. And she was also one of those astrologers who was known as someone who was able to make precision predictions. And this was how she was able to do it. And the reason why Johndro was known for making precision predictions is he also used this Bija corrected method. And as I've demonstrated uh, during this session, that they really come due in many cases to the day or very close. And in fact, the examples I chose were within that 6-day orb that Johndro had set.
Very interesting. I know that everybody's excited to change some of their programs on their software and try some of these things out and look at maybe some previous life experiences and just really see how that works out in the chart. I have a question, Ronald, if you have a moment to answer this. Costanza is asking, does Astrogold have Bija correction?
No, I mentioned that earlier, that
Right.
Astral Gold and Time Passages are two of them, and I like to use both of those. And unfortunately they don't, and so and they will and you know Astral Gold is published by Esoteric Technologies that wrote Solar Fire, so they have the capability to easily put it in there.
So that's where you were saying it would be a good idea maybe for people to write letters
People need to write because
yes,
because
to
they tend to
update.
respond to people's to their customers' requests. So please write them because it will certainly help.
That's
I
great.
certainly plan to write them too. I don't have Astro Gold yet. And the reason I haven't bought it because I know it's lacking the Bija option.
I see. Thank you. And the other question is what do you think about using Coke house systems instead of Placidus?
You know, the age-old question of the correct house system to use is one I've been pondering for almost 50 years. I don't have an answer. Uh, I I use right now. I lean toward Placidus, and the reason I tend to lean toward it is because when you look up in the sky to see where the sun is, Placidus, uh, the semi-diurnal arcs actually show where the sun will actually be. So I don't know if that's true with Coke or not. You know, and you know, also a strong case these days for whole sign houses too.
Interesting. Thank you. And then I'm just checking the chat box to see if anyone else has any additional questions. I think we've pretty much covered them. So with that being said, maybe Ronald, what they can do is if they are interested in taking a possible future class with you, they can send you an email that they have an interest in that.
Yes.
And this way you'll have their information when you're ready to start a class. That might be a great way to keep everyone that's interested in learning more about this information at hand.
Yes.
So be
Okay.
sure to send Ronald an email if you're interested in taking a future class, and it's rtiggle@gmail.com. And just mention that you were on the OPA presentation, and when he opens up future classes that you're interested in joining. And he'll can then follow up and follow up with you and maybe get you involved in a class. Okay, great. Anything else, everyone? Last minute to ask a question? I think that's it. Everybody's saying thank you very much, and they're very interested. And for all of you, I know this was a lot of information, so remember, you will get the recording of this later today. I will be sure to send that out. And on that, we'll also have Ronald's information on how to reach out to him. And it will also state that definitely you want to save this email, because when you get the link that says recording link, you'll be able to save this email into a file, and you'll be able to review this presentation over and over again, because I know I will be doing that as well, so that I really thoroughly understand the information. And with that, Ronald, thank you so much for doing this presentation for our OPA members. And We wish you, everyone, to be safe and well, and many blessings to everyone.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to share this information with you.
Thank you. Well, we certainly appreciate it. And with that, everyone, have a wonderful day. And we will see you on our next OPA member presentation. We're actually going to be doing OPA Live. You'll have information on that in your mailing as well. And our next OPA talk is going to be on Sunday, June 28th, I believe that is. My eyesight isn't great. June 28th, you'll get mailings on that as well. So be sure to check your inbox from OPA Outreach. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.